Direct from Foxborough, Massachusetts, the gem of Norfolk County, and taped at the studios of Foxborough Cable Access. It's Foxborough Central. And here's your host, Bob Hickey.
And hi, this is Bob Hickey. I am back with you, my friends. We are at Election Night 2014 here at the Hearn Middle School. Polls have closed. We're waiting with anticipation the election results from the selectman race between incumbent Mark Sullivan and challenger David Feldman. While we're waiting, I'm very excited to have the opportunity to bring to you Paul DeFazio. Paul, welcome to the program. How are you doing?
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate you having me here.
Well, it's a pleasure having you, and thank you for taking the time. I know that all your volunteer work on the advisory committee, this year even more volunteer work because you now get to be the chairman of the advisory committee, and a lot of work goes into that.
Yeah. My former chair, Larry Thomas. Yeah, he really hit a few things from me, but yeah, I think I quoted him as saying, "I didn't want to show you how the sausage is made. You may not want to make it." But no, it was good. He was a great mentor, and he's still part of the AdCom, which is really good for the town.
That's great. So the advisory committee, their role is to do what?
Essentially, anything that comes before the town on a warrant that has to do financially. A lot of other towns will call it the FinCom, the Financial Committee. We're tasked with taking the request, vetting it, trying to do as much research on it, get both sides of every story, kick it around with the AdCom members, and then make the best recommendation to the town for town meetings so that the town people who don't have the time to really look deep into these issues will know that volunteers, their own peers in the town, no agendas, are hashing it out. And the town moderator makes sure that, we have a good amount of people, plenty for a quorum. We have 12 this year.
Okay.
And we're not all like-minded. You have some people that are a little bit more conservative, a little bit more liberal.
Well, that's the strength of any democracy.
And
the
it
strength
works.
of any group is if you have different mindsets.
Right, and it works well. Plus, the beauty of the advisory committee is you're getting people from all different walks of life. For instance, I'm in law enforcement. But we have people that are lawyers. We have people who are CEOs, people who work in high tech. You get people with different perspectives on different issues, and I think that really brings a melting to the advisory committee. And even though you'll see a lot of the advisory committee recommendations seem to be, 10-0 or 10-0-1 or anything, that doesn't mean that issue that we were looking at wasn't hotly debated during the sausage making.
Well, as a former member of the Board of Selectmen, I presented before the advisory committee on several topics, and I will say that it is a healthy debate, and it's also a great opportunity to vet an issue. And frankly, if an article or an idea or a concept or a bylaw proposal can't pass muster before the advisory committee, then how does one expect it to pass muster before a town meeting? And so it's a great way to not only present the facts, bring the issue to light, but also sharpen the message. So that way, if there is a wonderful idea, a new proposal that is phenomenal, you're asking the tough questions and you're getting the information ahead of time so that way people can have it instead of being overwhelmed at town meeting floor. Because we have a significant warrant. And this meeting, of course, is the annual town meeting, Monday, May 12th. We do hope we'll see you there. It's at 7:30 p.m. at the Foxborough High School in the auditorium. And so, Paul, how many articles are on the warrant this year?
Right now it's 34, and I think that's where we're staying. It started with a few more, and even of these 34 articles, we have a few that are no action, that were asked for no action from the proponents of the bringing forth it for various reasons, which will be explained, in the printouts for people at town meeting, and then it will be explained by the AdCom members themselves. Because the one thing I can assure you of, whether it's the planning board, whether it's hashing out a contract for staff, the town department heads and the people involved have worked really hard at trying to get it to us so that we can make these recommendations.
Okay. Well, let's get right into it. We're talking about the annual town meeting for the 2014 warrant. So what are some of the highlights?
Well, the funny thing is you always have your articles that get a buzz, and I didn't mean that as a setup for a joke.
No, absolutely.
We do have on the warrant. Where do we put a marijuana dispensary? That might be one of the ones that people want to talk about, but what people should know coming out to town meeting, it's not about whether you're in favor of marijuana or not. That's not the issue. It's the town has to decide.
We have to have it somewhere.
Where are you going to put it? Because if you don't decide where you're going to put it, then it could be anywhere.
And that's the important thing, because if zoning is silent, then it can be anywhere. So by specifying an area for zoning to allow that as a permitted use, or a use by special permit, however you go down that road, you're saying as a community, this is what we want.
The town,
not necessarily that we want it.
Exactly. I mean, it's here. We're not saying we want it, but we, like with an adult entertainment,
exactly.
You have to decide where will you have it if somebody decides they want to bring it in here. And it's really up to the town to make that determination.
So what is the recommendation? What's on the warrant and what is the recommendation?
Well, the warrant for that one, and if you don't mind me putting on my eyeballs
I can even hold your microphone while you do that.
Thanks.
If you want.
Because I want to be as accurate as possible here. And I will say that these warrant articles have changed numbers so many times that it's really sometimes difficult.
And while you're doing that, I want to remind the folks at home that we are awaiting live election results. Paul and I will return after those results to talk some more. But don't be surprised if I just break away and we talk to Kathy Brady, who is the election warden here in Foxborough, and she will be presenting who won the Board of Selectmen race.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
I'm here to help.
Yeah. The advisory committee voted 10 for, 1 against, and 1 person abstained. And the thought process, again, was if and the majority of the AdCom felt, if we don't recommend a zoning, plan and a place for it, then somebody could open one up next door to you if you happen to live at a house that has commercial next door to you. I mean, it could be that easy.
And that's something that people really do need to understand, that if zoning is silent, then you're open to anything.
When I moved into Foxborough, and I had wonderful neighbors on Richard Street, and they had a hair salon next to me, and it was a wonderful little business. Well, they've moved on, but not sure if that's still a commercial zone grandfather. And if we didn't have this zoning, well, people could be picking up their medicinal marijuana right next door to my house.
And being law enforcement, I'm not even going to get into the conversation about the wisdom of it. I've got my own opinions, but well, enough buzz about that one.
Sure.
We must have the same writer.
Yeah.
So there are a number of articles on here that are interesting. I suppose front and center is a child safety committee. That is Article 22 from my reckoning. I don't know if it's still Article 22.
It is still Article 22, and
that
was going to be the one actually I was bringing up next.
I sensed
It's an important article. It was spearheaded by a great group of people, including one of our selectmen, Jim DeVellis. It is, and I want to make sure that I present it correctly as how it was presented to the AdCom, because I know there's things that are buzzing about right now that people are just making assumptions on. This plan, as presented to us, this is going to be a group of people who are going to try to provide education and knowledge and be there for the town, so that people, if there's ever an incident of inappropriate conduct with children, that people have an understanding of what should you do.
Right.
And they're not going to be, people that are conducting investigations. They're not going to be hiding in bushes. They're there to, let people know that Foxborough, cares about this topic, this situation. We want children to be safe everywhere they are, playing, in sports, in music, wherever they are, in schools, wherever. And I think that when the town people hear the presentation by some of the folks on it, they'll understand that this isn't something, we're not trying to create some new arm of law enforcement or to get into the police's job by any means. It is really an educational and an informational component.
And from what little I know about it, and I've had the proponents on my Foxborough Central program, and we've all been shocked, stunned, but also rewarded by having the topic not only come to the forefront, but seeing the town's response. And of course, the police investigation is ongoing. It is a decades-old issue that went on for decades, and so it's not just an easy open and shut, here it is. And because of that, I think that a lot of the questioning will go around how does this apply to what happened yesterday. I don't think that's really what this is about. This is more about what the town is doing to create a response and a protocol and an educational tool for tomorrow.
Absolutely. I don't think, and I'm gonna commend Jim DeVellis on this because he was really the lead selectman. This isn't trying to do anything about yesterday. Yesterday's yesterday. This is about never letting anything happen, or doing our best to educate people so that they're not paralyzed with, what do? I don't know what to do. There's places to go, there's people to meet with and talk with, and it's to provide the town with that type of a support system. I don't think this has anything to do with yesterday. That's not how it was ever presented to us.
And the interesting thing, though, is that because the victims' courage in coming forward from yesterday's issues, we're able to create this groundwork and create this municipal approach to doing the best to make sure that it doesn't happen again. The private sector, the YMCA, has a darkness to light. Boy Scouts have long had a too-deep leadership and childhood safety awareness. Coaches, quarries, there's many different approaches to preventing access to perpetrators and preventing incidents from happening. Unfortunately, there are bad people in the world out there, and we as a people, as a community, and as a society really need to understand that, embrace it. I'm very supportive of this because it shows that we as a town are not shirking our responsibility going forward. So much credit to the advisory committee for doing the research on this, and to the proponents and Jim DeVellis. I know that other selectmen, Mark Sullivan, former selectman Linda Walsh, have also worked very hard on this. People in the community, Pastor Dudley. So many people have really put themselves on the line to make this a reality. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at town meeting.
I hope that people will understand what the purpose of this is for. It's not to try to make up for things of the past. It's to move forward in the future so we don't have anything like that happening again. And nowadays things we hope things have changed, but there's new dangers out there. The technology that are in children's hands right now is nothing like what we used to, like when we were kids.
We've seen it so much with sexting and texting,
right?
And the dissemination of children pornography and other inappropriate viewings on computers and iPhones, and it's an amazing turn of accessibility.
The kids, the parents, coaches, teachers, everybody has to be aware that this is not something that anybody will turn a blind eye to. There'll be support there. And that's what this committee is really about. I support it totally. The AdCom was overwhelming on it. Nobody voted against it. I think we had 2 or 3 abstain just because they were looking for more information. Not that anybody was against it. So I'm really hoping that the town will come out, listen to what Jim DeVellis and the committee members will say, and make a decision that's right for this town.
And speaking of coming out, we hope to see everybody out at the annual town meeting on Monday, May 12th, starting at 7:30 p.m. at the Foxborough High School. There are some other interesting articles on here, and of course we didn't do any pre-interviews, so I'm just going to give you rapid fire because this is something that's interesting, is the scenic highway. There seem to be a number of roads that are being proposed to be added to this, and I don't really understand this. What is it?
Well, I'm going to go to my notes on
this
one,
ahead.
if you don't mind this. I do know, if you don't mind.
I'll be happy to do that. See, if we work together, we'll have a great program here. So,
the planning board, Sharon Wasson and the folks that she's with Bill Greta. They do such good work, and you know, as we said to them, we don't always agree, or we don't always get a majority vote, but I will never ever question their intent or their hard work. They're just, we're lucky to have them in our town and doing what they can. I don't know why I just put these away. I can't read it. I found it and I can't read it. That's great. Okay, this one, I will tell you that the advisory committee recommended disapproval of this.
Okay.
Essentially.
So you're not just being a rubber stamp for everything the town wants?
No.
Okay.
No, and like I said, you know, I certainly understand where the planning board was going on this, and it's not that the AdCom didn't think this had merit. We certainly did. This was quite honestly probably the most debated, discussed article on the whole agenda. Well, the Complete Streets would have been, but Complete Streets has gone in for no action.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to take that off my list, and we'll talk about this.
Yeah. Now, the reason that the advisory committee voted against this was essentially we were looking to what did the people who were on these streets, how were they affected? And even though I think, you know, the planning board did a phenomenal job, you know, getting the message out there, holding meetings after meetings, the advisory committee just felt that there were too many people who lived on these streets that weren't overwhelmingly for it. And, you know, it was one of these things where, was it going to make a big difference in your street? Was it going to change things? You know, was it going to, you know, put you in this different stratosphere of, you know, my street wasn't a scenic road.
Right.
But then again, that was another part of the discussion. It's like, well, why are we focusing on a couple of dozen streets, and what will this create?
And there's always a risk benefit to any proposition. And I live on Baker Street, and we went through some growing pains, and through the creation, I sat on the committee for the creation of the historic district. And I think that what you're saying now strikes such a familiar chord, because the advisory committee at the time in the mid-90s when this was being proposed essentially said, well, you people live on the street. If you all want it, then that's what we're going to do.
That's
but
exactly
it's because you all want it. And then there were some growing pains, and ended up that the historic district itself became about half of what was originally passed at town meeting, because as people started to understand what it entailed, people at one end of the street didn't want to. And so I think the town of Foxborough did the right thing by creating the historic district, and did the right thing by having the HALVING, the historic district, because that was in response to the people who live there. So what you're saying speaks true to what I think the intent of the people who live on a street are. And if you're saying that there wasn't an overwhelming response or representation, you know what? It sounds as though people were heard.
And it was street to street. You had some streets that did give an overwhelming, then you had others that won't. I will say this, at town meeting, expect the planning board to make an amendment where they're going to change some of the streets.
Okay.
It didn't change the disapproval vote, because we voted on that as an amendment also. It was still the premise of the whole thing. We just felt like, look, if I lived on that street and I didn't want it, I feel like now it's being kind of forced down my throat.
Sure.
And there's, you know, the thing here is, and I sound like I'm tooting Sharon's horn, which I am, because she's terrific. You know, I kept saying, what if? What could this cause? What costs could these cause? You know, and she kept assuring us that there really wasn't anything that you would foresee, but it's always the unforeseeable.
Well, you know,
things
that's a great way of looking at it too, because the law of unintended consequences always comes and bites us, and so it's really important to do that due diligence and research. And so if there's still unanswered questions, then I can see where the advisory committee gave a valid vote.
The other thing too,
valid recommendation.
Right, and the other thing too is, and I don't want to say I mean the AdCom really felt that we have enough checks and balances in place that if something was happening on your road or anything, you, the homeowner, with our present town bylaws and our you know,
protections, regulations, zoning,
that
planning,
common sense would prevail. I'm just always afraid of, and I've worked in government, for so long that I'm always afraid of attaching yourself or marrying to anything as a whole. Government scares me because it's like, one size fits all. And that doesn't work.
I suppose that a great correlation would be a mandatory sentencing for drug, and you end up having overcrowded jails, and it doesn't really address the issue.
You have so many problems. All of a sudden, 15 years after mandatory sentences, they realize there's a racial situation going on. You could get me going on that all day long.
Well, I didn't mean to do that, but under the rule of unintended consequences, you end up going down a road that maybe you didn't mean to, and so that's why the due diligence and the advisory committee plays such a key role here.
And again, I do not want to say that we don't have utmost confidence in the planning board and the department heads, because we do. And again, I want to stress, the one thing I've learned over the last 3 years on the advisory committee is we have some terrific people working and leading in this town, and we've got a brand new one, I think, with
We're
our
all
new
looking forward to seeing Mr. Keating come online.
He's already come in swinging good, and he's looking good.
So there are many other warrant articles. You said there were 34? 34 warrant articles. I've got a few that I was interested in, but what are some of your highlights? What if you were trying to tell somebody out at home, come to town meeting because...
Okay, great lead-in. And I'm going to have to... Political correctness is not my strength, I got to tell you. And I'll try my best. Essentially, the Financial Advisory Committee, Foxborough, I find it's the money. It's about what is costing this town, because when I moved into this town, basically 19, 20 years ago, I was lucky to move in. And then I grew into it, my job, my wife's job. We were able to assimilate financially as well. But I think a lot of people and our seniors are growing in numbers. We know that through a lot of the presentations.
We're an aging society and we have limited housing stock,
And you hear people who are afraid of not being able to afford Foxborough. So I always say it's about the money. Now, we have an operating budget of roughly a little over $60 million. I think if people are comfortable with, being confident with the town leaders, that's great, and I think they should be. However, and this is the plug to get people out to town meeting, is you realize that town meeting averages 200 to 300 people who are making the decisions financially.
Of a multi-million-dollar corporation.
And if you're not going to show up and put your hand up, and I know it's hard. I know it's hard for people to do it. I'm not judging people on that, but people have to understand that this town's operating budget can be determined and swayed, and maybe not the whole budget, but certain articles or certain lines of
It's as easy as
CIP.
saying hold. You get more information, and we've both seen it on the floor of town meeting where changes are made to the annual operating budget.
And you're talking millions and millions of dollars. And the opportunity that I had was on the advisory committee was first getting to understand the budget, and then getting to understand who's responsible for what. And again, we have great confidence in the people who lead these departments. But for me on this, I'm a manager, and I'm a manager in a state government who's had its budget reduced over years, but they never said, reduce your services or lay people off.
No,
that was never an objective. That was never an option. So what I'd like to see, and I've talked to Mr. Keegan, our new town manager, and challenged. I said, look, we've I don't want to say we're a get along, go along town, and hey, as long as we keep it under a 5 or 6% increase each year, which people will say, well, that's for the collective bargaining contracts. Okay, I get that. I understand you have to, pay attention to those things.
I'm going to say you hold right there, and we will be right back. Annual town meeting is a true representation of how people can make things happen.
Absolutely.
And if you have a hot button topic or something you feel strongly about, and you bring 75 of your nearest and dearest friends and neighbors out, you can make it happen. Annual town meeting is real government at the grassroots effort. And so people who want to see something happen, and they come out and they make it happen, town meeting is responsive. It really does happen.
Absolutely. That is the way it works, and we've seen it. We've seen people come in for one article and then they all get up and leave, but which is a little disheartening.
Well,
but
it's a lot of credit to Frank Splain, our current town moderator, and Bob Cutler, our town clerk, crafting the warrant so that way you keep the people there. I know that people grumble about it, but I'm a big proponent of putting the topic at the end to keep everybody's attention. And I know it's not always the most popular opinion, but I love town meeting. I love our form of government, and I think it's so important that people come out and stay and play.
It's once or twice a year, and it's so important to this town and the fabric of this town. And just getting back to what we were saying, at the very beginning of the town meeting, the first, Article, I think 4 and 5, it's all about the money.
It's all about the money.
And again, I think it's great that we have such trust in our, our leaders, and we want to and we should. But there's nothing wrong with questioning in a respectful way.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I have, tried over the last couple of years to try to challenge, if nothing else, is saying, why can't each department look at its budget, look at its operation, and find ways that you don't always have to go up 5% just because we do, and then pat ourselves on the back and say we did a great job.
It's interesting to say that because you want to go up 5, we do go up 3.5, but over the last 2 years, the rate of inflation has only been 1.5 on the average, and actually in 2009, it was deflation. And so when we think of it that way, we spend because we have, but are we really doing the right thing? We as a community have services to offer, and there's so much need out there, and there's so many ways that we can meet it. But as you say, as managers, we're always told, and I'm a manager in my own, I work for a corporation, and we are told to do more with less, budgets are slashed, shareholders must see their profit, and the voters, taxpayers, we are the shareholders.
Right. And what we can't do is constantly say, well, if we don't get that 5%, whatever, well, we're going to have layoffs or the services will be cut. I challenge every department head and every supervisor because that's what happened to me. And again, I say again, I work in the government. I work in corrections. They're not. They make as many criminals today as they did yesterday, and we're not told, well, hey, the budget's cut, why don't you let a bunch loose?
Right.
You don't.
That's not the option.
No, and we have to do what we can, but the option will never be, well, we have to lay people off.
You can't
whatever.
just close the door.
So you go in and you revisit your operation and see what maybe you did yesterday that it was effective, but now you've got other things that make up for it. I cannot, in the bigger the operation, the bigger the budget, you cannot tell me that there isn't room for that. I know that some of them, I always, use like our animal control. That wonderful person that's like, I'm not asking her to go in and cut. I mean, she's doing everything to the best of her ability. But then we have, and I'm not throwing stones,
Sure.
I'm not, but we have about a $30 million school budget. Yeah. And I think our school is wonderful. I think our leaders of our school are phenomenal. But I say, have we ever challenged them as managers and said, find a way to cut? And I'd like to see Bill Keegan, I think the advisory committee would like to see more efforts made that way. And again, it's not to make people feel good or to say, hey, we got conservative and cut. It's because I think there's a real concern out there for people being able to afford to live in this town. I mean, I know there's been talk about, wow, why is the budget so much if we have less of this now?
Yep.
That begs questions that can only be answered at town meeting.
And there are answers, and I'm going to give you the last word. That brings us up to the conclusion of this portion of the program. But at town meeting is where the questions are asked and where the answers have to be offered. And it's also a great way to get everybody in the same room. It's a big room, but to get everybody in the same room. And if you have a question on a legal topic, our town council, Dick Ellen, or a member of his office can get up and answer. If you have a question about process, town clerk Bob Cutler, who's done such a wonderful job as our interim town manager.
Fantastic.
I cannot say enough about that.
He and Randy Scollins have been so tremendously helpful to the advisory committee.
And Randy
We're
Scull's
very
been
fortunate.
wonderful in that role since 2005.
Yep.
And on the financial side, and then on the government structure side, Bill Keegan coming in will give us some new, fresh insight. And what a new chapter this is going to be. It's an exciting time to be in the town
I
politics.
think if any town meeting you are ever going to come to this one, maybe we don't have the warrants on it that we're going to rock place to live, and people care. And even if you disagree, we can do it in a respectful way that we can move on, because everybody knows you're looking out for the best for this town. And I'm really grateful to live here.
What a great way to end the program, Paul. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with me here on the program.
Thank you so much.
And
I
thank you for
appreciate
sharing.
it.
And remember, whoever the chairman is next year, don't tell him about this program until it comes time.
I've got a very smart vice chair. She'll be wonderful.
That's Paul DeFazio, who's the chairman of the advisory committee. I'm Bob Hickey. I've been your host for election night results 2014. Again, David Feldman, challenger, is our new selectman, 3-year term, beating Mark Sullivan. Congratulations to both candidates for running such a positive campaign. Congratulations to Mark Sullivan for entering the new chapter. While it is a loss, every opportunity does create a new opportunity. And thanks to him for all of his years of volunteering and for leading us in these past few years, not only as chairman, but also through some real hot button topics as a town. Congratulations to David Feldman and his family for taking on this new responsibility. And I cannot wait to see what new chapters are opened up on that front, and looking forward to David Feldman becoming a part of our fabric. On behalf of all the volunteers of Cable Access, we have Jim Darlington, Sean Kelly, who are working the cameras, Lauren Bitar in the truck, and Michael Weber, our executive director, bringing you all the exciting election results. Thank you, Foxborough. On behalf of all the volunteers, I'm Bob Hickey, your host. Have a great evening.